Today we're talking about a condition that affects 1 in 5,000 women, MRKH. And here to tell me more about it is Ashley Clark. I'm so glad you came in today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll admit, this is a new one on me. So tell me well, first of all, tell me what MRKH stands for.
So it's a big long name. So it's Mayer-Rokitansky-Küster-Hauser syndrome, which is really just the 4 doctors who kind of associated with or diagnosed the condition initially. But MRKH is a rare condition that affects the development of the reproductive system in females, and it affects about 1 in 5,000 females.
1 in 5,000, wow. So most of us would know somebody without really realizing that this is something they're dealing with. So tell me about your journey with this.
So I was diagnosed at 16 years old, and it was because I hadn't gotten my period, and so I was sent for an ultrasound and a blood test, and from there I was referred to a gynecologist who did an examination and reviewed my ultrasound and whatnot, and she was the one who diagnosed me with MRKH syndrome. So basically I learned that it would be impossible for me to carry a child, and that I would never get a period or anything like that. So that was kind of when I learned about it, and I've had about 10 years to kind of learn to accept it and do something about it.
And what can you do about it?
Not a whole lot per se.
Really? And you got
yeah. I'm basically missing a lot of my functional organs. So other than the ovaries, everything else for me was pretty much missing. And so in order to even be able to be intimate with my partner, I had to do treatment for that. And then in terms of having kids, if I do want to start a family, I'll need a surrogate to be able to have biological children. So I would need to do gestational carrier. And then that, or of course, adoption is an option, or you can be like me and have 2 cats, and that's good too.
So you produce eggs, so you could conceivably, excuse the pun.
Scientifically conceive, yeah.
Right. You could, in fact, harvest your egg and have it planted in a surrogate and become a mom that way.
Yeah.
So
I need an oven for my bun, basically.
Oven for your bun, okay. A good way to put it. So if you're producing eggs, can you get pregnant, but you just haven't got an oven, as you put it?
Yeah,
right?
There's nowhere for the eggs to go, basically, because my uterus was underdeveloped. So it's about the size of a cherry, and it should be the size of a pear, and it's not connected to anything. So yeah, there's no way for me to physically get pregnant at all.
Okay. So how other than did you always have the dream of being a mom someday?
I think you just grow up in a society that trains you to want that. I mean, you grow up and you see everybody they go to college, they get a house, they get married, and they have kids, and that's kind of the story that you see in society, and you don't see a whole lot out there about people who choose not to be parents. And I know even you actually went through that journey yourself. So of course, I grew up thinking I would be a mother. It wasn't even so much that I dreamt about it, it was just the expectation that society puts on you. And so when I learned that wasn't an option for me per se, it definitely was really devastating to be diagnosed with an infertile condition. So yeah, it was a lot to kind of overcome over the years.
How do other people handle, let's say your family, to start with your family. So you say, yeah, I got this condition. What happened then?
Yeah, so it definitely affected my mom pretty much, very much so. And of course, the mother instinct as well is to blame yourself. And a lot of mothers do go through that period of going, was it my fault? Because at the time there really wasn't a lot of information about what causes the syndrome, and there still isn't a whole lot of information. So she definitely felt awful about it, and we kind of healed together, to be honest. It brought us really close. I remember even at 12 and 13, my mom had sat me down and she was like, one of these days you're gonna hate me. You're gonna get in your teenage phase and we're not gonna get along, and I just want you to know that you'll love me eventually again. And she had that talk with me, and then at 16 I was diagnosed, and it was kind of like we were thrown into this world together, and it just kind of brought us really close. So we never went through that kind of rebel teenage phase between me and my mom. We've just always kind of been there for each other and been a support system. And so I was really lucky to have that, because I know in some families it's not something that you talk about. You don't talk about periods or sex or anything like that. So I was really lucky in that my mom and my family were all very open and supportive and able to kind of help each other through that journey at 16.
And I think that you're in your mid-20s and because obviously this syndrome has been around for a long time. They just didn't know it. They just, I would think, referred to women as barren was the term that was used. Wouldn't know why. They just simply never got pregnant. And they would have been outcasts at one time and in a lot of societies, including Canada at one time. So, if you had to have this, maybe now because it's more acceptable. That a lot of people
that's one of the things I'm definitely trying to change is the stigma that's attached to just fertility in general and talking about it more. And why does it have to be something we hide? Because that just makes us feel more isolated and alone. And that's something that, like, with me creating MRKH Canada, I'm trying to change is that, no, let's talk about this. Let's show that you aren't alone and that anybody with infertility, it's okay and you'll get through it. And we're in this together, right? Like, it's not that you're on your own alone journey. Obviously, we all have a personalized journey that's our own, but you're not alone in that journey. So, yeah.
So you understand each other.
Exactly.
How many members? 1 in 5,000. I could do the math, but how many members do you have as part of your organization?
So we don't have members per se. I do have a board of directors though, and we're still very much a startup, so we're all just kind of figuring it out together. But I do have about 5 people on my team. I have my vice chair Sunny, and I have my secretary Sheila, and both of those two have MRKH. And then my mom was gracious enough to be my treasurer. And then we have Dr. Sophie on our team as well. So she's kind of the physician side of it. She can bring the medical knowledge and whatnot. And I don't think I'm missing anything. Sheila, Sunny.
So there might be people out there right now who they may not even know they've got it, that this is their situation, but they could certainly get in touch and find out more about this. What, from other women you've dealt with who have this syndrome, what has their journey been like?
It really varies. It depends on where you are in the world and what kind of resources you have. I know for me, like, it was a pretty smooth, I don't know if you can say smooth, but it was a pretty smooth diagnosis for me. Like, it happened within probably 5 months, I'd say. For others, and even just as far as I think Brockville I've heard of, where it wasn't a good diagnosis and it took a long time and you kind of bounce from doctor to doctor, because a lot of doctors don't even know this exists. I've heard horror stories of doctors not even believing that someone who was already diagnosed and was telling their doctor, I have this, the doctor was like, that's not a condition, that doesn't exist. So
and
there's a lot.
And this is recent. This is like within
I don't know
the
how recent that one was, but yeah, it's just over the last 10 years that I've spoken with a lot of people with MRKH and heard these kind of horror stories of dealing with doctors, and every time you go to a doctor getting asked, when was your last period? And we going, we don't have one, and then them not believing us. And it's like there's a lot of pushback from uneducated medical field people, and that's something that's definitely part of our mission to kind of change. So it can be a lot of rocky diagnoses sometimes, and that's definitely something we're trying to kind of make the patient experience a little easier for people with MRKH and make it more well known both to the public and to the medical community and ourselves, and all of that.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. And I always found it curious because with me it was a choice, but I couldn't believe people I barely knew. The questions and the comments, you must have run into some of that too.
I've been pretty lucky. I think maybe because I'm open about MRKH that people don't bother asking, but I've definitely heard for people that don't really disclose it as publicly as I do, that of course they'll be getting asked, well, when are you starting a family and when are you having kids? And it's a very triggering question in today's society when infertility is definitely increasing, I'd say. And so it's not always a good question to ask nowadays.
Right. I was just, what occurred to me was another advantage you have is you won't go through menopause.
I will actually.
You will?
Yeah, because I have ovaries, so the cycle is still there.
No.
So I say I ovulate, but I don't menstruate. So I can experience all of the PMS symptoms without the actual shedding of the lining.
Oh, that's the worst part.
So I'm not looking forward to menopause because I feel like I have it easy right now because I don't deal with like actual periods. So I feel like menopause is just going to hit me even worse.
It is not fun. I'll tell you, I'll brace you for that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so your association is having a fundraiser. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of the not-for-profit organization MRKH Canada, and we are hosting a fundraiser on June 11th at the Invista Center. It's a 5K walk/run, or however you want to do that 5K. And it's kind of a themed event, so because MRKH affects 1 in 5,000, it's 5,000 meters for MRKH, and we're trying to raise $5,000 for MRKH Canada. So it all kind of lines up. And yeah, we'll be starting off at 10 a.m. on June 11th. And it's in the south field, so it's kind of on the right side of the Invista Center that we'll be starting kind of at that. It looks like a soccer field. And we'll be making our way to the KMP Trail, going there and back. And yeah, it's just kind of to raise awareness for MRKH and raise some funds for my organization since we're still a startup to kind of help us cover those startup costs. And we're also holding a medical conference in September. And that will be for people with MRKH and their supporters and physicians to come and kind of see each other in person, because it's very much an invisible syndrome. Like, you can be walking down the street and you might run into someone with MRKH, but you would never know it physically. So it's a way for us to kind of bring everybody together so that we can kind of relate to one another and be in the same room and feel like you're in a room where people know what you've kind of gone through, and to have that support and the education. And yeah, I know that for me, I found conferences were always very empowering.
So you'll come back and tell me about that one.
Absolutely.
All right. And if somebody would like to support your walk coming up in a few weeks, it's on the screen. It's please go ahead. It's I've learned so much today, and I thank you so much for coming in to tell me about it.
Thank you.
Okay.